Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're actually going to be undertaking a pretty fascinating and honestly urgent medical diagnosis. But our patient isn't a person this time around. It's our entire planet. We hear about the symptoms constantly, right? Things going wrong with the Earth. But today, we're going to look past that. We're going to examine the true vital signs of our world and uncover the actual root causes of its illness. So get ready, because we are going on an eye-opening journey into the ecological crisis.
Okay, let's dive into this and really examine our planet's failing vital signs. What you're about to hear is a rapid-fire sequence of, frankly, shocking statistics straight from our source material. And these numbers, they reveal the true, massive scale of what we're actually facing.
Just take a look at this staggering number. 67%. That is a full 2/3 of the planet's insects. Gone. Just disappeared in a few short years. I mean, think about that for a second. The tiny, silent little engines that literally keep our ecosystems running are vanishing at a rate we've never seen before. And wow, it doesn't stop there. Over just the last few decades, we've seen a drastic 60% plummet in wild mammal and fish populations. 60%. The sheer volume of wildlife that has been wiped out. It's basically a blaring alarm bell for the stability of our entire natural world. Now, alongside these devastating losses in nature, consider the absolute inefficiencies in our own human systems. 40% of our global food production is just wasted every single year, tossed out. Add to that the terrifying fact that rainwater across the entire globe is now considered undrinkable because of forever chemicals and pollutants. The system is clearly under immense, totally unsustainable stress. So, how do we actually frame all of this? Well, we define this as the ecological crisis. See, this isn't just about a couple of endangered species. It's a severe, systemic disruption of the planet, caused directly by human activities. It threatens the natural balance and literally the viability of all living things. Basically, it's a massive crisis of overexploitation. So the crucial point is, this is exactly where we often confuse the symptom with the disease. The media, politicians, they focus so heavily on climate change, right? But treating climate change alone is kind of like treating a fever without ever curing the underlying infection. The climate, that's merely the favor. The root cause is this systemic ecological crisis, the total breakdown of our soils, oceans, forests, and biodiversity. To really visualize this breakdown, scientists use this concept called planetary boundaries. And get this, we have already crossed 7 of the 9 limits. 7. This is the direct result of a civilization model that's built on infinite, linear extraction. Just taking resources, producing stuff, and throwing it away without any respect for the Earth's natural circular cycles. Okay, so if climate change is the fever, what are the actual drivers of the disease? Well, here are the deep root causes. First, we start with habitat destruction through massive urbanization and artificial soils. Then, deforestation, which just destroys our carbon sinks. Add in intensive agriculture that relies heavily on chemicals, the overfishing that's literally emptying our oceans, and finally, generalized cumulative pollution from plastics all the way to heavy metals.
Let's move to this next concept and see how this all builds. Habitat destruction isn't just about, paving over a random field. It triggers a deadly step-by-step cascade. First, we fragment habitats with roads and urban sprawl. Because of that fragmentation, species lose their breeding grounds and those essential migratory corridors. And that leads directly to local population collapse. The animals simply have nowhere left to live.
Which brings us to a really fundamental concept: biodiversity. Now, biodiversity is not just a luxury or some beautiful backdrop for a nature documentary. No, biodiversity is the actual living infrastructure of our planet. It's the sheer richness of life that provides essential services, things like pollination, air purification, and soil fertility. It's exactly what makes our ecosystems resilient in the first place.
And this brilliantly illustrates why that matters so much. When biodiversity collapses, we don't just lose animals. We lose highly functional ecological actors. We lose the pollinators, like bees, that literally grow our food. We lose the seed dispersers, like birds, that regenerate our forests. We lose the ecosystem engineers, like beavers and earthworms, that physically shape our soils and waterways. Without them, the entire food web just completely destabilizes. Coming back to our medical analogy for a second, climate change just amplifies all of these existing imbalances. When you have droughts hitting soils that are already degraded, or fires breaking out in forests that are already fragile and chopped up, the damage is multiplied. But remember, the root is the destruction of the living systems themselves. Okay, enough doom and gloom. Now it's time to talk about the cure.
We are absolutely not going to leave you in despair here, because if the disease is systemic, well, the cure is holistic, and it's entirely within our reach. We have incredible, practical solutions to regenerate these living systems. We can shift to regenerative agriculture to breathe life back into our soils. We can aggressively protect habitats and reforest intelligently. We can embrace a dietary transition, eating local, reducing industrial meat consumption, and we can absolutely slash pollution by building a circular economy where waste actually becomes a resource.
The author of our source material lays out this really beautiful, rhythmic pathway to achieve all this, known originally as repenser, réinventer, agir. So first, rethink. We have to rediscover a humble respect for all living things. Second, reinvent. We need to completely overhaul our core systems, especially how we produce our food. And third, act. We must take action both collectively through policies and locally, right in our own backyards and communities. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how it shows reinvention in action. A perfect example of reinventing our food systems is syntropic agriculture. This is a regenerative approach that literally mimics natural forests. By organizing crops vertically, so combining trees, shrubs, vegetables, and fungi all together, it enriches the soil and captures energy so effectively that it's actually 2 to 4 times more productive per square meter than traditional farming. That is huge. To really understand why that matters, consider the total contrast here. Industrial agriculture relies heavily on monoculture, growing massive fields of just a single crop. That makes it incredibly vulnerable to pests and requires tons of chemical inputs. Polyculture, on the other hand, grows multiple species together. This natural diversity builds incredible resilience, drastically reduces disease, and keeps the soil alive and healthy over the long haul. So, how do we bring this huge macro crisis down to the micro level? Well, here are 7 highly actionable steps you can actually take today. Plant native shrubs to feed your local pollinators. Install birdhouses to help them survive those harsh winters. Leave a wild, unmowed corner in your garden as an insect refuge. Buy local and seasonal food. Turn your kitchen peels into rich compost. Sort your waste properly to aid that circular economy we talked about. And most importantly, talk about ecology with the people around you to spread the awareness. We're going to leave you with this incredibly powerful, provocative thought straight from the text. The question is no longer whether we must act, but whether we will act at the root or only on the symptoms. So, what about you? Will you take this paradigm shift into your own life? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and hey, let's start acting at the root.